So, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's great to have you here. I know it's not always the most convenient time, but it's a good compromise, for at least me. And I'm going to tell a few jokes first to get us warmed up. Let's see. I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not sure. Or, well, where there's a will, I want to know if I'm in it. And the last one, when you fill out those forms, it says, who to contact in an emergency. I like to put a doctor. Anyway, with that, we'll get started. And I need somebody to police Dad so that he doesn't try to work the opera into every question that he answers. And I don't think we're going to get through all the questions, but we'll make a go at it. We'll alternate between Mom and Dad. I will be the moderator, and for now, maybe I will decide it's too big of a challenge. And if we go on too long, somebody raise their hand and we'll move on to the next topic. How does that sound? Yay, yeah, that sounds great, Frank. Thank you so much. You're so awesome.
Here's to Frank. Here.
Pat on your back. Yeah.
Actually, can I ask a question before you start?
Yeah, go on, Mike.
Oh, yes.
You just asked the question.
Yes, I can ask a second question. Yes, that was the second question. So how did you come up with this
Not so
idea?
close to you.
Oh, how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I could try to say something funny, but I think it's just we are so fortunate to still have parents and grandparents that are still with us. And, there's these memories that we all have little slivers of them, but I think it would be nice for all of us to hear it together and maybe clarify or remember together what some of the history is to pass on to our kids or just to savor for the rest of our lives. So that was the thinking, is to just get that done. So that's where I was coming from.
Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
For what?
For being here, for doing this, and especially to have it be multi-generational.
Yes.
So that, because all of us seem to have different snippets of things, so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mom was smart enough to get some things answered right beforehand. So we'll start with you. This should be easy, Mom. I think you wrote about this, but want to hear how you picked your college. We knew that budget was part of the equation, and just what did you, when you picked your college, how did that work out?
Well, you set out to everyone what I said, didn't you? Anyway, it wasn't as hard, I guess, to get into colleges when I arrived there, I guess. Is that true? What finally made the decision, at least I thought it was, is that when we graduated from high school, the guys are most of them were just being drafted or soon would be drafted. And there wasn't anything going on. So the choice was to wait, graduate in June, wait to September or October, and then go to Stafford or some of these other schools. But Cal was on a 4-month semester that ran year-round until I could start just a couple of weeks after graduating from high school. So that, I think, was part of the attraction. But as I think about it now, and then I really thought I'd like to go to Stanford all this time, but unbeknown to me, I think my family kind of said, yeah, don't you want to go on to start schools to fool you around? The cost was a little bit high for.
But it was your decision?
But I felt it was my decision. I never regretted it.
Good.
And as far as my sister goes, you asked, was she accepted? Have no idea. All I know, she just followed.
She was super smart also, by the way.
No, she was smart. Also. She was like Lisa, never made anything but A's on high school.
We won't talk about my test
Okay.
scores.
All right.
I have one follow-up question. I did read your answer, Mom, and I was interested, not just that it was 3 semesters at 4 months each, but I thought it said you could graduate in 3+ years.
2 years and 8 months,
And
which
is that-
is what your father did.
No, but is that what you also did?
I took a 1 semester off, so it took 3 years instead of 4.
So you graduated in basically 3 years also?
Yeah.
No,
I didn't know that.
that's what.
Did you know that?
Well, I had a feeling, and I knew Dad did, so I always thought that I was supposed to graduate in 3 years.
Oh.
Which is what I did, but that was not a good idea, but that's what I did.
That message didn't get down to the next offspring.
Their expectations got lowered by the end.
Nicholas took 5.
Okay, so,
I have another question. So Maureen was 2 years younger than you, right? But she was a year behind you in school?
She was 21 months younger.
Okay, but 1 year, just 1 year behind you in school.
Yeah.
that work, August and,
September?
yeah, okay. Okay, we'll switch to Dad now. I'm going to I'll switch between the questions, but I'll start with mine and we'll go to some other people as we have them. So Dad, how did Grandpa David manage to purchase one of the largest houses of land in Hillsborough shortly following the Depression?
Before I answer that, I think I can speak more. If you don't hear me, Linda,
Oh, I can hear
raise your hand. I think I can speak to that in a second, but first I want to add to the thing about Stanford. You know, at that time, we're talking about the end, shortly after the end of the Depression, and things were pretty bleak for a lot of people. It turned out that, you know, I went to Stanford for 1 year, and in compensation for it, every year I give the same amount back to Stanford as my parents paid for tuition, which was less than $500. So,
You give to Stanford?
right?
You give money to Stanford?
And to Berkeley, but did both. But we give more to Berkeley, but I continue to give 500 to Stanford, even though they don't need it with all that. But to come back to my parents, I want to say something different than answering the question to begin with, because for me, my parents, I describe them as the hero and heroine of my life. And a lot of things that contribute to that. But the first thing that comes to mind is that my father started with very little, and he achieved a lot. He not only was adventurous, willing to go as a man of early 20s across the world to China to try to seek his fortune in a new business, and when it didn't work out, he went to work for a business there, and he was living high in the hog. I had a horse in Shanghai, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Had a horse and servants, and then persuaded Esther, who also was adventurous, to take the train from New York to Seattle and get on a ship and meet him in Yokohama, Japan, and get married there. And then,
So before they got married, he convinced her to do it.
pardon?
They weren't married yet. did you?
No, they weren't married. They got married in Yokohama, Japan. And then his initial job with Alton Wyborg, which was the printing and lithographic ink business, with the motto, Hic et Ubique. Here and every, Hic et Ubique, being here and everywhere. It was originally based in Cincinnati, but then it had developed worldwide branches, and actually Frank Wyborg was somebody that was greatly admired by my dad, and for whom my brother Frank was named Frank Wyborg Elliott. But anyway, they moved from Shanghai to Hong Kong, and you can imagine the kind of life you could have in the 1920s in Hong Kong. They had probably 8 or 9 servants, and then Bill came along, and I don't know all the reasons why they decided that wasn't for them, and at a big cut in compensation, my father, who was a manager, both in Shanghai and then a manager in Hong Kong, they went back to New York, and he had to take a cut in compensation and go to work as a salesman, which must have been a big letdown for him. So he probably would have been even more affluent than he was when they bought the house in Hillsborough, had he done what he wanted to do in 1937. He was the organizer of a new business to sell printing and lithographic inks in Manhattan. And they actually bought machinery and started to line up the customers when the company he was working for, which was now called International Printing Ink, the original Orden Weiberg had been combined in other businesses. They persuaded him, well, what is it you want? He said, well, I want to run a business. They said, well, we have a business that's not doing well in California. So if you want to go out there and look at it, and before you go ahead with this other venture, you could do that. So we did go out and look, and I guess weighing the responsibilities of a family with 4 small children, and it was the end of the Depression, he decided that was a better thing to do. I never talked in great length with him about it, but he actually regretted it because, among other reasons, he said that Frank would never been killed if they'd stayed in New York.
Oh, man. Never heard that.
That's a great answer.
That's a great answer. So,
Thank you, Dad.
okay.
It's horrible that he felt that way.
So if we've heard part of the stories, should we, can we try and add?
Yeah.
So one story I was told by grandmother was that Uncle or Grandpa David sent the material for her wedding dress and a letter that said, this is sort of the last letter, and this is the material for your wedding dress, and if you don't come and we don't get married, then you're not going to hear from me again. That's what Grandma Esther told me.
You know more than I know.
So I'm just
I wonder about that.
Well, I did.
Okay, so go ahead.
So and the other part of it, Grandma said,
Esther, by the way, was a very good storyteller.
well, good. Then I'm going to follow in that footsteps. So the other.
One thing, Shelley's created a special cake for the occasion. You want to describe what you did?
Oh,
Got
it's
two-
checkerboard because when families get together, right, it's 2 people, but you're one.
And carrot cake is the favorite of one, theoretically, the favorite of one.
Well, I thought, Jan likes a white cake. She doesn't like chocolate. And I thought, what's Dawn's favorite? Is carrot? No, he likes everything. So, so I just,
You mix them
Elliott's
together. So you
like
got 2 different
carrot
kinds of
cakes are
cake.
good.
Wow,
Everyone likes carrot
that's
cake.
great.
Sorry, Linda.
No, I love that you did that. The other thing Grandma told me, and again, I spent a lot of time with Grandma Esther, and so if she was using poetic license, there must be some grain of truth in it somewhere. But she talked about when she took that train to Seattle,
That's okay. I'll go get some cards.
and that then she got on the boat, and the boat left the United States. She wondered what in the world she was doing. And she looked back going, I'm leaving everything I know to go do this. So that was the other thing she told me. And I think, Dad, you told me this, or she did, that after they got married, I knew that they were married in Japan because I still have a kimono that she told me was the one she was married in. I still have the kimono. And then which I wore to a wedding once. And the other thing is I have a Chinese coat that I guess was from Hong Kong. But the other thing she told me was when she was about to have Uncle Bill, and I think you've told me this too, Dad, that there were lots of complications. And Grandpa David was asked, do we save your wife or do we save your son? And Grandpa David said, we can have another son, but I can't have another Esther wife. So my wife first, but they were able to save Bill as well. So those are the stories that I remember being told as a young girl that were very impressionable stories. And I've carried them around. I guess
I've never heard that.
well, that's why I thought I'd do.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So, Dad, did you want to add anything to the story of your father? And
Well, yeah, but just to come back to your, I wasn't ducking your question, but my emphasis, I guess, is where do people go? And they both came from modest backgrounds, as we know that Esther's parents were homesteaders, as were her uncles. And that was a tough life. That one.
What was the name of the town again, Dad? That they...
Well, they lived outside of Dansville, New York.
Dansville. I keep wanting to say Danbury, but it's Dansville.
Dansville. But to come back to the question, so here we are. It's a surprise to me that how affluent my parents became, considering how they started. But there was a deal when he took over the business in California where he had a profit sharing arrangement based on the profitability of the business, and which was actually had been something he had been exposed to. But on Y board had that practice with the managers of particular operations shared out of profit sharing agreements. And that wasn't a common thing generally in business in those days, but that was kind of the deal he made when he came to California. Of course, the big thing in terms of Hillsborough real estate is that it was so depressed due to the Depression, and so that house and property that originally cost a couple $100,000 sold in 1937 for less than half of what it had cost. And then they bought it for less than half of what that guy had paid for. Actually, you may have heard the story that in 1937, the original estate was called the Bowie Estate.
How do you spell that?
B-O-W-I-E.
Oh.
The family that later actually were, among other interests, had an electric switch business in San Francisco that sold the utilities. But in 1937, one of the Pope and Talbot heirs, Pope and Talbot being a big lumber interest, one of the Pope and Talbot heirs bought it. But my folks bought it from his estate, and it was a welcome.
sorry for the loud entrance. Glad you made it.
Very,
Thank you. Yeah.
it was a very depressed market.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who could afford to buy and to maintain a place like that, people were wary of doing it.
So the house originally cost $250. Somebody bought it for half that.
Probably at least a couple hundred more, yeah. And somebody bought it for $75,000.
And he bought it for half that.
About 30, yeah.
Oh my God. And do you remember how many acres it was?
It was 5 acres.
It was 5 acres to begin with.
Right. And I was, despite, I'm going to address the question about David being the golden boy lately, but he was.
Well, he's the only boy.
I want to interject. I was the one charged with spraying the orchard trees, running the rototiller, and making sure the lawnmower kept running when David got to run the lawnmower, which had a very good engine on it, while the rest of the stuff was always closing down. Anyway, end of speech.
But one other, would you clarify, because you first lived on Fulton Road, When was that you lived there?
Pardon?
When did you move to Fulton Road?
In 1938, when we came to California, we moved first to the Benjamin Franklin Hotel for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then my parents rented a house on Fulton Road, which had five bedrooms, and a playroom, 3-car garage. They were renting it, I'm sure, for $125 a month. But they eventually bought it for $11,000, I think.
And then when did you move to High Orchard?
1942.
Oh, not till 1942.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, shall we move on to the
Yeah.
next?
1942, shortly after, before you and I.
We didn't meet in 1946, I think.
We did.
I thought you got married in 46.
48.
48? So if you'd known you'd only been there 4 years, might you pick somebody else? All right, Mom, it's your turn.
No, I've already had a turn.
No.
I don't have the exciting stuff.
Oh, we haven't gotten to your excitement.
Okay, well, let's get to one of Linda's from Mom.
Oh,
On a
Did
point
Grandma-
of order, I don't, a point of order, where does the name Lala come from?
Okay, we'll get to that later. This is we don't answer your questions tonight.
it came
Did
from
Grandma-
my siblings.
Did Grandma Zella really, Mom, did Grandma Zella really learn to drive when she was 16?
The first time I heard of that was when I read it.
Okay, so I guess
Wait
you
a
might be able to
minute,
comment on that.
I can tell you this, she was given a car though, right?
She drove one of the first Model Ts,
Mhm.
and I don't think she was married until she was 19 years old. So it could have been, I'm sure, that she could have been driving it for 2 or 3 years before.
How would it come about that, she didn't come from a wealthy family, so how did it come about she had a car to drive?
Well, her father he started out, he came from Canada because he was from Quebec, and the reason he
We're
left.
not talking about Monroe, we're talking about your mom's parents?
Well, I thought that's who you were asking.
Your mom's parents, yeah. You came from Quebec?
He came from, my mom's dad came from Quebec, and he had the same white, beautiful skin that my mother had. And it turned out that you have to wear heavy woolen clothing up in Quebec. It's cold. Yeah, and his skin, he just was always uncomfortable. So he decided to leave, and he ended up in the Central Valley of California, which made sense.
Do you know where he originally came from?
Who?
Your mother's father. Before Quebec, was he born in
What
Quebec?
was his name?
Your
RJ or
maternal
something like
grandpa?
that? Did Dad get it?
I'm talking about his
Your
Pierce, Marshall Pierce.
That's
That's my mother's father.
Marshall Pierce.
Yeah.
And did you have an abbreviation for that?
wrong. You what?
No, that was
The other side?
the other side.
Okay.
Runs the same.
Marshall Pierce came from Quebec.
He came from the Oklahoma, but you asked how did.
No, whatever you want to go with it.
No, well, apparently he did very well. He farmed for a while, yes. They came to Clovis, that's where my grandmother lived. And she was living on a farm, and she was healthy, cooked for the guys that were working the farm. But anyway, they met. And so apparently he started building houses, and they ended up building in Fresno. And I guess that was a way to earn money.
He was like a developer kind of guy?
Well, no, but he built the one that they were living in, which I remember quite well, spent a lot of time there, and the one next door to them. And others, I guess, but I don't know where. But that must have been, that's all I know. I know so little, I hate to tell you.
But they made enough money so that your mom could drive a car at a relatively young age. That had to be pretty
Yeah.
unusual, I would think.
No, well, I'm sorry, I can't give you any more
You're doing great.
than that.
That's terrific.
But she wanted to be a hairdresser, and of course that
She being your mom or your?
My mother.
Yeah.
That didn't go over too well with her mother. But she, they gave her a car, apparently did a lot of things for her. But then, you all know that she eloped then.
They did.
No,
No.
didn't know
Didn't
that.
you know that?
Monroe and Zella?
Elope?
She and my father eloped to get married because my grandmother didn't want them around.
What was wrong with him?
What?
Because he was a
He's
home
old.
builder?
Well,
No,
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 no.
that was great grandpa.
Oh.
He was a butcher at the time.
Oh.
He was a butcher, and
Even
that's
worse.
where she.
Was he too low of a class for you?
Well, I don't think any guy would have been right for her daughter, probably. But I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
But she and my father never had a loving relationship. Like, for me, I always said, if we divorced, my father would take Dawn. She was crazy about you.
Your mother.
Mother, yeah.
Dawn.
Zella, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean it
But
wasn't
they
loving?
didn't have a loving
What-
relationship.
What do you mean by that?
Your parents were.
No, the
Zella
relation
and
between
grandparents.
Monroe and Grandma Pierce. That was-
Oh, I thought you meant Monroe and Zella.
But we should say, I should interject that her name was Johnny, and she was the classy lady.
Johnny was.
I never knew that till I read that today,
But
that they named her Johnny.
Well, it was funny, her parents had, my grandmother's parents got married, the guy from Quebec, she, the farm girl. No, wait, not. Anyway, they had their first child, it was a girl. I think they named her Rachel or something. And then they had their second child, another girl, and they were so disappointed.
That was Zella.
Like, maybe you were wishing for it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And so
Georgina.
they
Or
named
Georgie, Georgia.
So they named her Johnny. Johnny Elizabeth. And that's where,
That's the second child's name, Johnny?
yeah.
Was that
Johnny
was
Elizabeth.
That's your grandmother?
That's
or-
Grandma Pierce.
Grandma
My
Pierce.
grandmother was Johnny.
Johnny.
Then her parents proceeded to have 4 boys in a row.
You just gotta keep going.
So see,
That's the message.
Yeah, so there's a pattern for it.
6 kids, huh? That's where I got started.
But one thing, I don't know if you all know, but I'll say very briefly, I said it the other night, you heard it, I'm sorry. But my father enlisted in World War I before he was 18 years old. They were drafting people, and he went into the infantry, or the artillery, I guess is what he did. And he went overseas, and I'm not gonna go to the battle, he didn't get, I don't think in any, it was toward the end or something. And, but anyway, during the 20th century, it's a century of war. And I hope we're not facing that here. We had that war, we had the Second World War, where we had to be concerned about Frank, whether or not he would be drafted, and all the boys at that age. In fact, even now, when you're 18, you have to put your name down, don't you?
Yeah.
You can't register for college
Yeah.
without doing that.
But
Is that
they,
new?
You ever registered?
No.
didn't you know?
Can you have
You,
2
you
jobs?
might have skipped over it because they enacted it again.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Oh,
Did you,
well, anyway.
you registered that,
So,
right?
we had 2 wars, we had, I'm missing some of the small ones, Vietnam,
Korea.
Korea, Vietnam, and now all these others.
Afghanistan.
Gulf.
I mean, it's just war.
So to back up for a second, their question came from because Grandpa Rowe told me that when he saw your mother driving this car,
Yeah,
that he was,
I never heard that.
and so, but I didn't realize that they had eloped.
I
But
never told you that.
no, he kind of left that part out, but he said, but anyway, he said.
Yeah.
Love
it
at first
a
sight.
good story. Anyway, I just want you to know that about your grandfather.
That's a terrific story.
Yeah.
That's terrific, Mom.
Anyway.
Okay, let's go back to,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Did your dad have siblings?
my father,
Yeah.
my understanding is he had a sister that died as a child and no others.
In where?
And no others.
And
Oh, and no others, oh.
And then his mother also died very early. Yeah, I know relatively little about my father's family.
In Europe, or in Europe they died, or they passed off in Americas?
In New
They were
York.
living in New York.
In New
He was born in New York.
Oh, okay.
Did you meet those grandparents?
We'll get into that.
Oh, okay.
Find your
Oh,
way fast.
okay.
I just want a quick question for Mom. Grandpa Rowe, did he get injured when he was?
He was what?
He hurt his ear, didn't he get injured when he was?
Oh, he said from the cannon that that was the reason he couldn't hear. But I think it sort of runs in the family.
What did you say, Mark? Okay, well,
Wait,
so
hold on,
then
can I-
one of your questions, go ahead,
Oh,
Jackie.
sorry, maybe so maybe other people have the genealogy much better in their mind than some of the rest of us do, so maybe not. But it would be very cool, maybe for the next time, to have like the family tree
Oh.
with the names.
Yeah,
because
good idea.
I don't know much,
Sure.
when we're kind of bouncing
Yeah,
around names, it's hard to
kinda
follow.
keep them all
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah, no, for
I was
sure.
gonna bring a flip chart stand, but I decided, because I usually am at a flip chart stand.
Oh,
Yeah, we could use that
Well-
next time.
yeah, the other the teacher in the family.
Okay, kind of this is for Dad and kind of and I think this is what you're getting at, so feel free to elaborate. What, was Grandma Esther first generation American? If not, where was she born and what about her parents? That's a Lala question. Is that,
Well, actually, she was born when my grandparents were living on a farm in outside of Dansville, and he had two. My grandfather had two brothers. They also were homesteaders, and they were all named for presidents. My grandfather was named for James Monroe, and the next one was named for Andrew Jackson, and I've forgotten who the third one was. I knew
all last name Sutton?
also, right?
Okay.
And actually, I looked up, I'm trying to find the grave for my grandfather, but I found his brother Andrew Jackson was buried in a neighboring county cemetery. But when we were children, when I was very, very young, of course, we always went to the farm every summer for a couple of weeks. And part of the tradition of the family was to go to the cemetery. But that cemetery was close by. It wasn't far away where I found later that Andrew Jackson Sutton was buried. But to answer the question, as far as I know, not only my mother, but her parents were born in that part of upstate New York. And so they were not recent immigrants, whereas apparently my dad's parents were recent immigrants when he was born.
So your dad's parents were not born in the US?
No, I'm pretty sure from research that my brother David did, that they were immigrants, and while he was born in New York City, they were immigrants.
From where?
Well, according to what he found, what some of you found on research was from Romania, but all of this was news to me. I knew he grew up on the Lower East Side, and but a lot of the history in between, because his mother had died, and his father, I think, remarried. By the way, his father was never affluent. I do know that later in my dad's life, he was sending money to support his father, which is the reverse. But that's saying the pattern, I know, because.
Here we go.
Thank you, Dad. I'm glad you learned.
Okay, I'm sorry, I meant to cut the conversation off here.
Because of the children falling by the wayside, I'm counting on Tyler and Dallas and Alex and Jackie to be my benefactors.
Dad, if we send you money, will you accept it?
Great question.
Dad, do you know the first name of your grandfather on your father's side?
Is it?
I think it was Isaac's.
Oh, okay.
I think his wife's name was Lena.
So let me make sure I
Where is
know.
Dansville? Where is Dansville? New York? New York?
Dansville's in upstate New York, western New York. Actually, from Hempstead, Long Island, you go through Pennsylvania to get there.
Yeah. Oh,
Must
to
be
get
pretty-
that,
pretty west
You
then.
drive, what?
Pretty far west then.
Yeah.
yeah, because you have to get all the way up to
So,
western New York.
so Grandpa David's parents were born in Romania, we think. And then his mother died at a young age, or when he was
Yes,
young? How old
yeah.
was he approximately?
I don't know.
And then that grandfather remarried, you think?
Yeah.
And they both of them came to the US with your dad?
No.
I kind of put it
But
together.
it sounded, the way I heard it, Frank, was that Grandpa David's parents were in New York, and that's where Grandpa David was born. And subsequently, great-grandma Lena died.
Her name was Lena?
Yeah, and then it sounds like great-grandpa Isaac then might have remarried, but it sounds also, and that whatever sibling there was, if there was this sister, Grandpa David, that she must have died early, and it also sounds like that Grandpa David started early trying to be entrepreneurial and making money and doing things.
Well, I do know this. I love to tell that about my father, that he believed in treating people who were working, waiters and bellmen and all, generously. He himself had been a bellman in the Catskills, so, and one of the things I like to say about him was that I remember having lunch with him one time when the waiter wasn't doing a very good job. And he said, don't you worry about it, you just give him the normal tip, because somebody else will correct him. So,
Yeah, I've heard that before.
That's
Never heard that.
That's a good lesson, I guess.
Yeah.
So just, did Lily have it right, so that your father was born in New York, is that?
Yes, that's
okay.
true.
And so, and there was a stepmother as well?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So what did Lena, or whatever her name is?
She died. That was the.
Do we know what, or
Well,
what did she
I
die?
don't know nothing about that.
Do we know what age your father was?
No, I would think he was a small child.
Do you
Okay.
remember your grandpa Isaac at all?
I remember going there very infrequently, and that was one of the questions later in the list.